ride.
Want a lift?
Hey! Okay, dude, let's see what that jalopy can do!
What's a jalopy?
First off the line.
Yeah, I'm sure they're feeling pretty silly right now.
Hey guys, Zack here, and welcome back to Megas Month. So, this episode, Ultra-Cadets, is the first episode of the second season, but I actually want to talk about the second season itself first, because, funnily enough, the second season never got officially greenlit to be made. So, basically what happened is Cartoon Network, I promised this in the previous episode, but basically what happened was Cartoon Network came to this team behind Megas XLR, and told them to start writing scripts for a potential season 2 because they weren't sure if they were going to bring it back for a second season, and either because they didn't fully understand what Cartoon Network was asking for, or understand completely, but decided to just go ahead with it anyway. Bronowski, Kirstic, and Schaefer then decided to actually go into a full production for season 2. They were given money to write scripts for the second season, but what they did instead was they started actually designing all of the enemies and all of the villains for the series, as well as designing all of the other things, and just storyboarding it and in addition to writing all the scripts, they just storyboarded it. They designed all the creatures and villains and stuff like that, and by the time a Cartoon Network executive came along to check on them, they had basically had the second season finished, and just needed to go into an animation studio to record and animate everything. So of course, after seeing that, it was ultimately decided that Megas XLR would indeed get a second season, even though they never officially greenlit it for one. And basically, the story behind this is that the team behind Megas XLR basically just bullied Cartoon Network into giving them a second season, simply by just making the second season without any of them knowing. So yeah, and I do kind of find it kind of funny. It's kind of like how what is it? It's kind of like how another series, Aqua Teen Hunger Force. It's kind of like how Aqua Teen just kept getting seasons because it was just so inexpensive to make that the studios just kind of forgot they were actually pouring money into it to make it. So yeah, so it's kind of like that. It's just they took the money, stretched it out as far as they could to actually get the second season made, and it does wind up working a lot, because this second season does kind of refine a lot of the designs to make them a lot less angular, and also it makes everybody feel a lot more rounder and a lot less sharp featured. So yeah, the second season overall has a somewhat better animation style that just makes them look neat. That just makes them look less angular and clanky. But yeah, and also this is the first. Now getting into the actual first episode, Ultra-Cadets, which is well and away one of the funniest opening episodes. I remember watching this one, and I remember it being very nuts. And sure enough, after rewatching it many years later, it is still very nuts. But yeah, basically what happens is, so the episode actually opens up with Coop and Kiva actually putting various modifications into Megas for different and obviously what they're doing does fundamentally the same thing. Obviously, Coop is actually putting more engines and stuff into the system to actually make it run faster and give it more horsepower. With Jamie pointing out that seems a little bit pointless, and even wonders what it's supposed to do. And I should mention, Jamie, throughout the first part of this episode, he's bored out of his mind. He's sitting there with a magazine called How to Pick Up Space Chicks, which fittingly enough is very on character for Jamie. But well, Kiva actually is working inside of Megas and is actually designing something. I forget what she's doing. She's doing like some plasma ion thing. I don't fully understand the whole sciencey mumbo jumbo behind it. But when Coop just kind of gives her a blank expression, because obviously he doesn't understand all the sciencey stuff, she immediately explains that she basically just did exactly what Coop did. She designed something to make us faster, and Coop even gives her a thumbs up, pointing out that that's actually kind of neat. And And of course, Jamie is obviously again. Jamie points out that it's very bored out of his mind, and for good reason. Because they kind of sort of defeated the Glorft in the previous episode. They're kind of bored out of their mind because their one arch enemy hasn't really attacked them recently. So of course, Jamie is just kind of bored and itching for a fight because there hasn't been any sort of giant monster or anything else to actually go and punch. And of course, Coop does point out that he's just going to be finishing up the modifications he's making to Megas, and then they're going to go, and then he mentions that they're actually going to go to a crab restaurant and go eat some stuff there. And Jamie then proceeds to get up and walk away, pointing out that that's fine, but also mutters under his breath that they have a giant robot that's not really doing anything, and he's a little disappointed that they're not smashing stuff. But sure enough, as Jamie's actually walking away to go stretch his legs, he's actually confronted by the Ultra-Cadets, which I should mention are a parody of the Sailor Moon. I don't know, it's a parody of Magical Girls, but it's a parody of the ones from Sailor Moon specifically. I don't know the names of Sailor Moon because I've never watched Sailor Moon, but it's deliberately very deliberately a parody of them, and it also proceeds to go into a very comical thing where it showcases just how long all of these little animation sequences where the girls transform is very comically long. So in order of their transformation sequences, I'm gonna go with I'm gonna go in order of who they are. So first and foremost, you've got Galaxia, who's kind of like the leader, sort of, and I think she's the oldest. And then you've got Comet, who is pink hair, and she's the second oldest. And then you've got Pulsar, who is the third oldest. She has brown hair. And then you've got Quasar, who is the Sailor Moon stand-in, specifically the Sailor Moon character with a I think she's got a little bit more. Again, I haven't watched Sailor Moon, so I don't know, but I do know is that her transformation sequence is a reference to the fact that Sailor Moon's specific transformation sequence takes longer than the other girls. And because she's obviously the main character, and to kind of comically point that out, there's just several minutes where she's not even doing like a transformation thing. She's just spinning around for several minutes while the other girls are just kind of staying there waiting for her to finish her thing. And of course, she does eventually finish because again, it's a parody of the Sailor Moon, so it's deliberately supposed to take much longer. But eventually, all of the girls do eventually finish their respective transformation sequences and reveal to Jamie why they're there. And of course, they then proceed to point out that they're actually from a planet and are looking for the one that they call Coop. And of course, Jamie has no idea, points out that they're probably looking for Coop, but has no real idea of what he's actually has no real idea of what to actually do because they're obviously standing right in front of him and doesn't really know how to answer them. And he is about to tell them that Coop is actually currently working on his robot and they can actually know, and that he actually knows where to find him. But then Nova specifically mentions that Jamie is a lot cuter, that Coop is a lot cuter in person, and it's at this point where Jamie takes full advantage of the fact that they are that they seem to think he's Coop, so he kind of just goes with it. He pretends that he is Coop, and claims that yes, I am indeed Coop, and I am, and then proceeds to start flirting with all of the Ultra-Cadets, but of course the Ultra-Cadets waste no time in explaining who they actually are, and proceeds to go on to explain how their planet is actually being attacked by a giant scary monster called the Kurdok, which they then go on point out that they actually need Coop's expert piloting skills to actually to actually deal with it. And of course, Jamie, pretending to be Coop, points out that his robot is unfortunately in the shop and he's unable to help, but does point out that in the meantime they can actually go and watch a movie together, and makes no subtle instances of the fact that he's trying to flirt with all four of these girls at once. And to be fair, they are into him. I should mention that they are into him because they do think he's actually this impressively capable pilot, and also because he's cute. But I should mention it. Jamie is indeed a handsome person. I do point out that he's kind of a terrible person, but girls do find him attractive. It's only when they find out that the rest of him is terrible that they eventually decide to stop being interested in him. So, yeah, of course, Jamie, of course, Coop, of course, Jamie quickly points out that he's not really that without a giant robot he doesn't feel like he's going to be much help. But of course, the Ultra-Cadets reveal that they actually do have a backup plan for that, and proceed to teleport back to their home planet with Jamie in tow. And Jamie, of course, very much panics because he's suddenly being teleported away, and tries to get Coop's attention, but is too busy. But Coop is too busy working on his modifications to hear him, and Jamie is just kind of teleported to another planet against his will. So, yeah, Jamie kind of bites off more than he can chew in this episode, and admittedly, for the first half of the episode, he does kind of deserve what he gets, and sure enough, Coop and Kiva immediately start looking for Jamie, since Coop is hungry and is trying to figure and of course is trying to figure out where Jamie is because they normally eat together. And Kiva does indeed remark why she thinks it's so quiet, but of course finally realizes that's because Jamie wasn't there, that it was actually as quiet as it was. But of course she also they then proceed to start searching the junkyard trying to find him. And meanwhile, Jamie has since been transported to the Ultra-Cadets' home planet, which, as we find out, is this giant dome-like thing. They have a giant dome-like city that's designed to protect them from the Kurdok, and the though Jamie is very much trying throughout this entire thing to actually try and get out of it by actually trying to point out that he's not really in the mood to actually fight, and points out that he doesn't feel like that he'll actually be able to pull it off, and doesn't even sure if he can pull it off. But of course, the Ultra-Cadets aren't really listening to his complaints and bullshit, and proceed to just kind of, go on to explain how their respective how their plan has been destroyed by the Kurdok. But they point out that they actually specifically need Jamie's help to actually help them, and proceed to take them to a robot that they actually have. As it turns out, they have a spare robot, and there's a very comical scene where it looks like it's this giant war machine that Jamie's going to be able to fight the Kurdok in. But then it's revealed that isn't even the robot that he's actually supposed to be fighting in, and we then see his temporary robot, which the Ultra-Cadets mentioned is more than a little bit old, and but points out that it should get the job done, no problem, and proceed to push him into the elevator to actually board the temporary robot. And of course, Jamie once again is very much pointing out that he would very much like to just kind of bow out at any time, but of course the Ultra-Cadets aren't really listening to him, and eventually shove him into the cockpit of the robot, and point out that he should do fine, and that's Jamie kind of panics when he realizes the Ultra-Cadets aren't coming with him to help. But they point out that they would just get in the way and leave the rest up to him. And of course, Jamie is eventually trying to figure out how to actually control the robot, and eventually sits down, and in doing so winds up getting locked into the cockpit because the little shoulder straps just kind of come down and lock him in. And then the cockpit moves up over his feet, and he quickly realizes that whether he wants to or not, he's actually going to have to go and fight. And it's at this point where the Ultra-Cadets then proceed to parade Jamie in his new giant robot through the town, who are all singing Jamie's praises as Coop about how he's going to destroy the Kurdok and save their planet. And eventually, Jamie is transported to the outskirts of the planet, or rather to the outskirts of the city, where he ultimately decides that if he is indeed going to fight, that he might as well, because as he points out, he doesn't feel like it should be as big a deal as it is, because of course Coop as he mentions, Coop does this all the time, and points out that if Coop can do it and the little girls couldn't really handle it, then he points out that it's probably fine and he probably has nothing to worry about, but that winds up going completely out of the way as soon as Jamie actually sees the Kurdok face to face. And the Kurdok is revealed to be this giant lava monster-like thing. It starts barging through all the different forests surrounding the Ultra-Cadets' hometown, and of course Jamie uses the Mech's built-in zoom and enhance feature to kind of get a better look at what he's looking at. And sure enough, he starts panicking when he sees how terrifying the Kurdok actually is. And But then the Ultra-Cadets interrupt and proceed to point out that they're actually observing him remotely, and point out that the rest is up to him, and that they'll give him input as needed. But and of course, this is as the Kurdock is seemingly about to attack Jamie, so it's a very comical scene where remember, Jamie has his thing zoomed in, so he doesn't fully understand that the Kurdock isn't actually about to attack him yet. So it's just this little jump scare thing where he winds up almost getting punched by the Kurdock, and then the Ultra-Cadets interrupt him. And it's at this point where the Kurdock then notices Jamie is there and proceeds to get ready to attack him. And Jamie quickly realizes that he needs to get the hell out of there. And but also because he doesn't fully understand what any of the buttons do, because it's a new mech and he himself has never actually driven one before. He starts just pressing random buttons, and this winds up propelling him in the general direction of the Kurdock, who then proceeds to actually go past the Kurdock and lead it away from the town, which does wind up working in the town's favor, because now the Kurdock is just kind of following Jamie away from the town, and of course the Ultra-Cadets then proceed to sing Coop's praise, pointing about how brave he is trying to go and face the Kurdock head on, but while also leading the Kurdock away from the town so that he can fight it without any sort of casualties. And they do remark how brave that is as a person. Meanwhile, Jamie and Kiva are still looking for. Well, meanwhile, I'm getting already confused because obviously Coop is explained is claiming to Jamie is claiming to be Coop basically, and that kind of threw me for a loop for a bit. But in any case, Coop and Kiva are currently looking for still continuing to look for Jamie, and of course, Coop points out that he doesn't know where he's actually supposed to look, since they've obviously looked everywhere around the junkyard, and Coop is starting to point out that this isn't funny anymore, and that they need to actually find Jamie. And it's at this point where Goat actually walks up and remarks that he actually did see Jamie disappear. As it turns out, Goat was actually a witness to the whole thing. He saw Jamie talking to some sort of ultra space chicks, which of course that causes Kiva to become a little bit concerned. And even points out that this could very well be a problem, but also points out that it should be fine, and that also points out that it should be fine, and that Jamie should be okay. But Coop also mentions the idea of that he can't really eat without Jamie, because as we find out, there are several other people. This is the big thing where they have a big guy little guy dynamic, and sure enough, Coop imagines him being the only big guy without a little guy, and that's not something he wants to do. So he wants to go and find Jamie, and Kiva agrees. Mostly because, as she points out, leaving Jamie alone with a bunch of innocent aliens isn't the best idea. And when Coop wonders out loud what could possibly be a problem, and he then imagines Jamie actually somehow becoming a dictator over the entire planet and blowing it up because they don't please him very much. So he quickly realizes that Kiva's right and that they should actually go and find Jamie, and the two of them immediately pilot into Megas with Goat in tow, because as it turns out, and as he kind of thinks, apparently one of the Ultra-Cadets, and he's not entirely sure which one, but one of the Ultra-Cadets actually winds up shooting him a glance, and as he puts it, was giving him the eyes. So of course, he concludes that he points out that he wants to go with them to actually find out more about them and find out what kind of girls they are. And sure enough, that's at this point where Coop, Kiva, and Goat then proceed to go off and try and find Jamie, even though they later admit that they're having a little bit of trouble finding him. And meanwhile, Jamie has since led the Kurdock to a giant active volcano, and is currently kind of cornered on the volcano, and is trying to figure out how exactly he's supposed to defeat the Kurdock. And the Kurdock does eventually corner Jamie, is about to go and punch him, but as it turns out, this winds up working in Jamie's favor, because the Kurdock winds up slipping and falling while it goes to attack Jamie, and winds up actually falling into the active volcano and seemingly being destroyed. And Jamie points out that may not be as much of a victory, but he'll take it. And then proceeds to go and celebrate while the Ultra Cadets, who are oblivious to the whole thing because he moves out of range of the system, then bring him back and kind of champion him around as a hero. As Coop, Kiva, and Goat eventually do figure out where Jamie is, they're currently riding in Megas trying to figure it out, and Coop asks Kiva what's taking so long and if she has anything on Jamie yet, and of course Kiva's pointing out that she's trying to read a transportation signature from an unknown planet and that it could take a while, but she does eventually find it in the middle of that sentence, and proceeds to point out that she has indeed found something that's a little bit faint, but it should be close. And of course when Coop points out that is most likely Jamie, it goes off in the general direction of that, and sure enough, Coop then proceeds to come in with his giant robot as Jamie is kind of lavishing in the praise of the Ultra Cadets and is kind of taking all the fact that all of them seem to think he's some sort of hero, and sure enough, Jamie then proceeds to fabricate several of the battles against the forces of evil with Coop, and he proceeds, and it's a very bad photo, and it's a very deliberately bad Photoshop where Jamie has photoshopped his face over Coop in his flashback, and Coop's over Jamie's. It's a really funny thing where the two are just kind of fighting various aliens and fighting various monsters, and sure enough, we see Ender in one of these sequences, but where Jamie's actually trying to fight, is actually claiming to fight Ender, even though that's not actually what happened. We know that's not actually what happened, but Jamie's making it up to make himself look good in front of the Ultra Cadets. So yeah, of course the Ultra Cadets are just going to try kind of buy the whole thing, and to this point where he's actually going into one of his stories, he accidentally smashes one of the buildings by accident because he's clumsy and doesn't fully understand the robot. And this is as Coop is actually showing up to go and find Jamie. And of course, Kiva points out that Jamie is there somewhere, is in there somewhere, and of course Coop misunderstands the situation completely. He thinks the giant robot is actually the reason Jamie disappeared, and even though Kiva tries to explain that Jamie is currently in the giant robot, Coop decides to actually go and fly in and punch it, actually destroying the dome surrounding the Ultra Cadet city, and proceeds to throw a punch at Jamie unwittingly because he doesn't understand that it's actually Jamie in the mech. And this causes the mech to actually be somewhat taken out because now Jamie is unable to figure out how to get it to stand up. So and of course this causes the Ultra Cadets to become very pissed off at Coop and proceed to actually teleport outside Jamie's temporary mech into just in front of it, and then proceed to reveal that of course there's been a big misunderstanding. They then proceed to explain that they then proceed to think that Coop actually stole Jamie's mech, and also points out that he's a bit of a chubby thief, as they put him, and of course Coop then points out that he doesn't even deny the fact that he's fat. In fact, I've mentioned this previously, but I've mentioned this countless times actually, but Coop is very much comfortable in his own skin and doesn't mind the fact that he's fat. So he just kind of brags about it to the Ultra Cadets, who are a little bit repulsed by the fact that he's very proud of it. And of course, Jamie then proceeds to call up Coop and ask him what he's doing, but also makes it seem like he's talking about himself and himself instead of Coop, and kind of just tries to continue the charade that Jamie is Coop, and Coop is indeed not who he actually says he is. And this of course causes Coop to finally become confused and wonders what exactly they're talking about. And of course they then proceed to go on, and of course the Ultra Cadets then proceed to go on about how Coop is their hero and that they'll protect them no matter what. And then proceed to get ready to go and fight Coop. Of course, Glorft then proceeds to point out that out to Coop, who has no idea why the Ultra Cadets are actually trying to fight him. All he knows is that there seems to be, he points out both of the problems with that situation, about A, there seems to have been some big misunderstanding, and B, the Ultra Cadets are too small to actually do anything against Megas. So, of course, he points out that as long as they're willing to talk, he's more than willing to help them clear up the misunderstanding. But, of course, the Ultra Cadets don't kind of really listen to him, and then reveal that they actually are more than capable of actually facing off against Megas. And sure enough, what we find out is that the Ultra-Cadets, in addition to their abilities of being Sailor Moon parodies and Magical Girl parodies, also have their own magical robots, which I should mention are different from the typical giant robots that Megas is based on. It's different from the actual mechanical robots that actually work based on mechanical powers and stuff. And rather, magical robots are kind of a subset of the Mecha series, where they use magical powers instead of scientific stuff. And it ultimately becomes sure enough, the Ultra-Cadets then proceed to transform into their magical mechs, which of course are bigger and look exactly like them. So I'm just gonna picture them all at once, if I can find a picture of those. But basically, the Ultra-Cadets just turn into giant robot versions of themselves and then proceed to get ready to fight Coop. And Coop points out that he isn't really looking for a fight, and proceeds to immediately go on the defensive because he doesn't want to actually punch the Ultra-Cadets, because of course the Ultra-Cadets are going on the idea that Jamie is actually Coop, and Coop is currently stealing Jamie's mech. But of course, because they actually think that Coop is the bad guy, they try to fight him. And Coop is very much on the defensive. He doesn't want to fight anybody, and is even trying to explain that he is in fact Coop and isn't actually stealing the mech. And of course the Ultra-Cadets aren't listening, and eventually do manage to knock him in the building, pointing out that they seem to have defeated him. But then Coop gets up and dusts himself off, and then proceeds to go into one of his rants about how he's kind of sick about the fact that they've kidnapped his best friend, about how they're punching him while he's down, how they actually made him miss second lunch, and he's ultimately just kind of upset about the fact that nobody's really explaining anything to him. So he just kind of goes into his rant, and then with Goat kind of remarking that he's kind of interested, he is again, this is like a recurring bit throughout this whole scene, but Goat is very confused, is kind of a little bit wishy-washy about which one of the 4 Ultra-Cadets he likes, and he might wind up adding a comment to that at the end of Coop's rant. But in any case, Coop then proceeds to actually start fighting back, and what we find out is actually holding himself pretty handily against the Ultra-Cadets. Even though there are 4 of them, and they have magical girl powers in their giant robots, Coop is still able to fully handle them, is able to hold his own against them. And during the fight, Jamie at one point tries to get up, and still kind of hiding the fact that he isn't in fact Coop. He then proceeds to try and explain how it's cool, and that Coop is actually his sidekick. But of course nobody is listening to him, and he's just kind of sitting there trying to figure out how to get the giant robot to stand up so he can actually intervene and stop them from beating the hell out of Coop. And this was wind up paying off, because as the Ultra-Cadets and Coop are actually fighting, one of the Ultra-Cadets actually winds up dodging out of the way of one of Megas' punches, and it winds up sending Jamie flying. And this of course causes Jamie to almost fall into the active volcano where he fight the Kurdok earlier, and Jamie's only barely able to save himself. And of course Coop quickly realizes that he needs to go and save Jamie, but the Ultra-Cadets won't let him, and will actually wind up grabbing onto him so that he can't actually escape, and point out that he's not going to be allowed to hurt Jamie. And it's at this point where Coop explains that he's not going to hurt Jamie, and that he's actually going to go and save him, and also proceeds to point out that he is in fact Coop, and then proceeds to break out of their dog pile that they put him in and fly off. And sure enough, he manages to fly off and go and saves Jamie just as he's about to fall in the volcano. But this winds up, but of course, because of the sustained fighting that Coop has been subjected to, Megas now has several engine problems, and then proceeds to point out that he doesn't have any more energy to fight. And of course Kiva points out that he needs to conserve the energy, but he can't, because the Ultra-Cadets immediately show up and try to fight Coop again. And Coop points out the very obvious, that he doesn't have any more energy to fight, and of course his mech is running out of power. And Jamie, quickly realizing that this whole situation is his fault and that Coop is actually in very big trouble because of him, then finally decides to come clean and explain how Coop is actually Coop and he's actually Jamie. And this, of course, causes the Ultra-Cadets to become very obviously pissed off at Jamie for lying to them, and also are very repulsed by the fact that Coop is actually the one who actually is the one they actually wanted. And of course because they are admittedly repulsed by Coop, they point out that he's a little bit gross and a little bit disgusting, so they don't really like him all that much. But and of course, while they are, I mean, and of course they then proceed to go and try and punch Jamie, pointing out that he lied to them. But Coop then intervenes and then proceeds to point out that he knows Jamie is a bit of a screw up, and a bit of an ass. But does point out that he's his best friend and that nobody's allowed to pummel him. And then adds an except for him, and then proceeds to beat Jamie's mech within an inch of its life. Mainly because Jamie has both lied to everybody, and I mean, Jamie very much deserves the beatdown that Coop is giving him. Coop very much points out that Jamie has lied to everybody, deceived everybody, got him in a lot of trouble, and got him attacked by the Ultra-Cadets. So of course Coop isn't very happy with Jamie right now, and takes all of that out on his giant robot. And while the Ultra-Cadets just kind of watch from a distance, but also point out that since it's very clear that Jamie has dealt with the Kurdock and it's now no longer a problem, that they merely just tell Coop and Jamie and Kiva to leave and never come back. So, which of course Coop does after pummeling Jamie's robot. And Jamie eventually climbs into Megas after surviving the pummeling, and of course Coop asks him why they told him that, why he pretended to be Coop, and of course Jamie just points out that they're space chicks, and that he's very open about the fact that he very much would have liked to have been in a romantic relationship with at least one of them, and with that Coop just kind of and of course Coop and Kiva just kind of roll their eyes at him and point out that what he did was very dangerous and that he should never try and do that again. And with that, they proceed to fly off, while the Ultra-Cadets try and figure out how exactly it was that Jamie actually defeated the Kurdock in the first place. And of course they quickly point, and of course it's Nova who actually points out that so long as they didn't throw it into an active volcano, it'll probably be fine. Which of course is how Jamie actually defeated the Kurdock. So of course the Kurdock then proceeds to emerge from the active volcano, a lot bigger now, and then proceeds to actually go and attack their city, which no longer has a protective dome around it. So of course the Kurdock winds up destroying their hometown off screen, while Jamie tries to explain their exploits about how he was a hero and how he actually saved their planet from the Kurdock, which he didn't. But and of course, Coop doesn't believe Jamie when he says he defeated the Kurdock. Well, Kiva just kind of points out that a giant fire-breathing monster seems like the worst possible lie that Jamie could have come up with. But Jamie once again points out that he is indeed a hero and he did indeed save their planet. But Goat then proceeds to point out that as it was indeed an actual hero, he would have gotten digits, and then proceeds to pull out Galaxia's phone number. And while the rest of the group kind of laughs at Jamie's expense, and then at the end of the episode, the end sequence for this is that Goat actually winds up going on a date with one of the Ultra-Cadets. He actually winds up going on a date with Galaxia, who gave him his number. He immediately called her, and apparently she had enough free time in between cleaning up her city and dealing with the Kurdock to actually go off and go on a date with this human man from a junkyard. And I do kind of find that kind of funny about how Goat has finally gotten success with a woman and Jamie has not. So yeah, of course this episode is a very outrageous opening episode for the second season, and that kind of works. I do kind of like how outrageous this is. It is a very fun episode because it makes fun of magical girls and magical robots, which of course the series hasn't really tackled up until now, because obviously the giant robots that have been in the series have been very deliberately mechanical and futuristic-y. But so yeah, this is the first time they've actually tackled like magical girl stuff, and magical robot stuff, and I do kind of like it. But this episode is also just really funny and really nuts as a first episode, because obviously this episode is just weird. Obviously it just makes fun of a lot of magical stuff, so it's a very weird episode. But I do kind of like it. So in any case, yeah, that's my review of Megas XLR. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon if you want to help support the show. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does really help me out. And you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks that are my way saying thanks. So be sure to check those out. Link is down in the description. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out what's linked in the end screen for you guys. The top video is the most recent video. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the playlist linked in the end screen is actually the previous one of these that I did, Megas Month. So if you absolutely, well, not Megas Month, but Courage Month. If you absolutely want to see Courage Month, go check that one out. You're obviously watching Megas Month right now. And yeah, I hope you guys will continue to support Megas Month. We are now going into the second season, so this is going to be a very big. So this is obviously we're over halfway through through Megas XLR at this point. So yeah, I hope you guys will continue to support it. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.